Not long after I turned 18 years old, I landed a job through a temp agency at a semiconductor plant. My job was to prep the semiconductors for tin plating by placing them on racks that could generate an electrical current. I was pretty proud that I had a night shift gig working from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., even though my folks were against it. This was in 1993, when minimum wage was a whopping $4.25 per hour. I was banking $5.50, working about 60 hours a week, which equated to about $300 a week after taxes. I worked side by side with a Filipino guy named Paul, who was really grouchy and pretty much called me out anytime I fucked up. He let me know on many occasions that I was just a kid working in the man's job, and that I shouldn't even be there. One night, Paul was in an especially foul mood, and lit me up for not wearing my face shield. There were acid vats all over the room we worked in. Our shift supervisor, David, happened to be walking by just as I was getting chewed out by Paul. He seemed like a nice enough guy whenever we interacted, which wasn't often up to that point. He walks up and asks what the issue is, and my coworker proceeds to go off about the fact that I was working without a shield. He tells Paul to calm down and asks me to come into his office. At that point, I was pretty sure I was about to be canned. I was really nervous as we walked out of the room and down the corridor to his office. When we got there, though, he told me that I could hang out with him for the rest of the night. I apologized over and over again, but he just waved me off and said that Paul had a perpetual stick up his ass. He wound up tasking me with some filing. Then he showed me how he did his paperwork and his QA, quality assurance tests on the finished batches. The night went by pretty quick after that, and I went home feeling pretty good. The next night, David tells me that I'll be working with him again. I jump at the chance to hang out in his office, and we have a pretty good time together. He told me that I reminded him of his son, who was my age. I thought that he looked a bit young to have an 18-year-old, but why would he lie about something like that? After that, we talked about Creedence Clearwater Revival. There was a CD being advertised on TV for $19.95 at the time that I really wanted, and he told me how much he loved that group. He told me he had been to some of their concerts, and offered to let me borrow his Creedence Hot Stuff tape until I got paid and could afford to order the set. When my shift ended, though, Paul cornered me in the bathroom when we were alone and gave me a pretty stern warning about David. He said to watch myself around him, because David liked young boys who he could groom. I reminded Paul that I was a man, not a boy, and he just laughed in my face. I felt pretty shaken up by the whole thing, and considered telling David about what Paul had said. Then I felt embarrassed for some reason, and decided that I probably shouldn't go through with it. I worked with David in his office for the rest of the week. I remember thinking to myself how cool it was to be working with the boss. On the last night of our work week, David asked me to stay in his office during my lunch break because he had something he wanted to talk about with me. I was a little nervous that my assignment was ending because there had been a round of layoffs in the company. Instead, he told me that he was considering making me his assistant and that I would be hired on as a permanent very soon. I couldn't believe my luck and thanked him over and over again. He just smiled and said, "It's my pleasure, little buddy." It struck me as a little odd that he would call me that, but I blew it off because I figured he was older, and maybe it was just something he said to his own kid. On Sunday night, I came in for work, and Paul cornered me again, telling me to be careful. I tried to be as respectful as I could, but honestly I was really shaken up. When I reported to David's office, he noticed something was off and tried to ask me about it. I lied and told him I was under some stress, but that it was nothing I couldn't handle. He got really upset with me and asked if someone at work was giving me trouble, but I calmed him down and told him that wasn't any issue. He then gets up and looks through the half glass of his door, while I start measuring the thickness of the newest batch. Out of nowhere, he comes up from behind and starts massaging my shoulders. I get an uncomfortable feeling right away, but then he stops and pats my shoulder in an almost fatherly fashion and moves on. He and I engage in our usual conversation, but nothing seems out of the ordinary until lunchtime, when he asked me to stay and talk with him again. I immediately assumed it was about making me his new assistant, and agreed. Once again, he tells me what a great future I can have with the company, and how I can work with him every night. I'm thinking about how proud my folks are going to be, and how I'm going to spend my raise money, so I decide to impress him by continuing to work while we talk about my promotion. While I'm bending over to look through a microscope for nodules on the semiconductors, I feel him run his hands all over my ass and immediately stand straight up. He then proceeds to say in the creepiest voice ever, "You got a nice, plump boy butt. I'd really like to get up into that." At this point, I'm confused and scared. This guy was easily 100 pounds heavier and a whole lot stronger than I was, and he was essentially blocking my path out of the office. I ask him to please let me leave, and he just smiles while he's shaking his head no, while he keeps talking to me. "You keep showing that ass of yours off like it's some sort of trophy. Please, just let me go. Come on, baby cakes. Let Daddy have some of that plum. I'm not gay." "Sure you are." "Let me leave or I'm calling the cops." "You won't be calling them from this phone." At that exact moment, he reaches over and disconnects the cord from the wall while I tremble in fear. I had no idea what to do, so I just made a break for the door. He grabbed my arm and digs in with his fingers. Then he yanks me into the chair and tells me that he'll hurt me if I say a word to anyone. I felt like such a pussy for this, but I burst into tears and promised him that I wouldn't say anything if he would just leave me alone. Before he let me go, he told me that my mom and dad would be ashamed of me for acting like a girl, and that I'd been teasing him with my ass ever since my assignment began. He told me that boys like me didn't leave a party without getting fucked in the ass. I ran out of the office in tears, right past Paul, who looked alarmed and followed me to the restroom to make sure I was okay. David saw him walking after me and came into the bathroom with us. He pretty much ordered Paul back to his workstation and told me to leave immediately. I washed my face and walked out the door, trying my hardest to keep it together until I got to my car. When I got home, I went to my room without waking my folks and cried in bed until the sun came up. Then I called the temp agency and quit. Recently, I've gotten a few messages asking if I'd had any other creepy encounters since the last story I posted, which occurred about 7 years ago. This is the most recent encounter I've had. When I started college in the fall of 2014, I decided that I needed to get a part-time job to help keep up with the daily costs of commuting to school. It took quite a bit of time to find jobs that were hiring someone with no experience, and eventually I landed a fast food job. I hated it. After about a month of working there, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I quit. One day, while sitting in my math class, I was chatting my classmate about how annoyed I had been with my previous job and how I was looking for a new one. She then told me that the place she worked at was hiring and that I would be a perfect fit. She told me it was a small, privately owned bakery and that the owner liked to hire young, pretty girls to work the register. Even better, it was only a 5-minute drive from my college. She told me she'd speak to her boss about me, and the next day I got a call to set up an interview. I went in for the interview, and I met the owner, Tasha, who was a young, pretty woman. She gave me a quick rundown on how the store was run, and explained to me that the employees almost always worked alone due to the fact that all of the baked goods were made in the morning by the bakers, and all the employees had to do was decorate them with frosting in the kitchen if they ran out of the goods up front. This seemed easy enough, and after filling out some paperwork, she told me to come in for training the next week. The job was exceptionally easy. After about 2 weeks working there, I really started to get the hang of things, and because of how often I worked with customers, I started to develop a really cheery attitude and was very friendly to people, even if they weren't always friendly to me. I enjoyed running the shop alone, because I tend to feel stressed when I have a manager standing over my shoulder constantly. On top of that, I always felt safe, because we had multiple cameras throughout the bakery. I usually worked the evening shifts, which meant that I was the person who closed down the shop at night and cleaned everything up. One night, around 7 p.m., I was sitting alone in the dining area, folding some boxes. No customers had been in for about 40 minutes, and I was lost in the monotony of the work I was doing. I heard the loud ding of the door opening, and a man walked into the shop. "Hi, welcome. How can I help you today?" I said as I walked behind the counter to wash my hands. "Oh, give me a moment. I'm just looking," replied the man. This wasn't uncommon, so I brushed it off and told him to take as much time as he needed. After a few minutes, though, I started to get a strange feeling. The man was staring through the glass, but every few seconds he would glance at me quickly and look back to the sweets. I asked him once again if he needed any help, and he replied no. A few more minutes passed and I became more uneasy. Just then, a few more customers walked in, and he waved them ahead of him, and I began to serve them. Once they left, he walked back up to the counter and towards the cash register. He leaned towards me a bit. "You have really beautiful eyes," he said, smiling. I'll never forget that smile. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. He exposed only his top teeth, continued staring at me, and kept licking his lips over and over. Thanks. Can I get you anything?" I asked. He ignored my question. "What time does this shop close?" 8 p.m. "Do you have any plans after work?" "Yes, I've got to go home and feed my dogs," I lied. "Would you be interested in going somewhere with me tonight?" he asked, with his smile widening. I said no thank you, and I glanced up at the camera pointing down at us. He looked up directly upwards and into the lens, then back at me. "Do you have a boyfriend?" "Yes, I do." "Come on, sweetheart. You don't have to lie to me." At this point, I was becoming seriously freaked out by this guy. "Let's go somewhere after you get off work." I said no again, and he asked me why not, his smile fading from his mouth. "Because I just told you I have a boyfriend and it would be inappropriate. I'm going to have to ask you to buy something or leave," I said with my voice sounding rather trembly. "Oh, alright. Can I have a vanilla cupcake with pink frosting, please?" I glanced over at the racks to check to see if we had any out. We didn't. I walked into the kitchen as quickly as possible without breaking into a sprint. I frosted a cupcake and brought it back out as fast as possible, boxed it up and asked for payment. He swiped his credit card and the payment was accepted, but he continued to stare at me. "Do you need something else?" I could feel my chest getting tight and my face getting hot. "Can I have your number?" he asked with a slight grin. "No, I don't share my number with customers." He stared directly into my eyes for a few more seconds, his hands in his pockets. He started to get really red before saying, "Sorry, I'm just really turned on right now," and proceeding to reach down in his pants and start fondling himself right there in front of the counter. I was in total disbelief. I guess when he saw the look of horror on my face, he panicked and ran out the door, leaving his cupcake on the counter. As soon as he left, the phone rang. It was my boss. "Who's the creep?" she inquired, as she had apparently been watching the security cameras to check in on me and could tell by my body language that something was not right. I immediately broke down and started crying, as I never imagined something like this happening to me in a tiny little bakery. She told me to lock the door and call the police, who were stationed right across the street from us. My boss arrived about 30 minutes later, and the police were already there talking with me when she got there. They asked her to pull the security footage, and when we watched it, we saw that every time I had stepped into the kitchen to help other customers, he was fondling himself while their backs were turned. I gave them a description of what he looked like, and they asked how he had paid. I told them he swiped his credit card. My boss told them she could reprint the receipt from the transaction, which was the first and last names of the credit card holder on it. One of the cops asked someone back at the station to run the name, and almost immediately they found his driver's license, which I confirmed to be the same person. My boss suggested that he might be recognized by the people who owned the hookah bar right next door to us, as his name sounded Middle Eastern. She asked them the next night, and they immediately recognized him as the younger brother of a guy they grew up with, who was engaged to be married within the month. The next day, the police went to his residence and arrested him for public indecency. Something my boss said to me that day has always stuck with me. If you ever feel unsafe at work, I want you to walk into the kitchen and go out the back door and call the police. Don't worry about the cash register. Don't worry about any of the food. All those things can be replaced, but you can't. I felt so grateful to have a boss who actually cared about the safety of her employees. It took me a while to feel safe working the night shift again, but after a while I got back into the swing of things, and I still work there to this day. I'm just glad I never saw that guy again, as the police ordered him to stay 100 feet away from the property at all times. So I'm pretty new here, and one of the things that brought me to this site is that I actually have a handful of creepy encounters. I've read for a while and posted just a few times, but I'm finally starting to share some of my stories. I used to work at a privately owned gym in the middle of a somewhat sketchy town, and as a very small 21-year-old girl, I'd close by myself at 9 or 10 at night depending on the day of the week. Everyone kind of knew each other. I was friends or good acquaintances with a lot of the members, so mostly everyone knew that I was there by myself at night. My mother hated this, and freaked out often about the fact that I was by myself. So one night, I was closing up and had gotten mostly everything done ahead of time, because I wasn't really busy. I forgot to lock the door, but once I realized it, I thought, I'm leaving in just a few minutes. I'll finish up quickly and just go. I went down the hallway to the locker rooms and cleaned out the trash cans, went back to the front, and noticing it was about 15 or 20 minutes after closing, I thought it was strange that someone was parked outside the door that had not been there before. I contemplated my options when I saw the car shut off. I could try to get the keys and attempt to lock the door before the person directly in front of the door got to it, which was downright impossible. Or I could hide. I had already flipped the breakers to turn off the upstairs lights. The upstairs consisted of a room with a tanning room and a multi-purpose workout room. I obviously opted for the room with a door and a lock, and crouched down in the dark beside the tanning bed, pulled out my cell phone, and quietly called my mom. I know that the first thought was, why not call 911? First of all, I had no idea who this person was, and thought at the time it could have easily been a member who had simply forgotten something. I recognize I should have called the cops, but I was so afraid of it being something completely harmless and embarrassing myself, filing out incident reports and the like. Anyway, I call my mom, and I can hear someone enter the building. I'm whispering very quietly, telling her to please come quick. I hear walking and movement downstairs, and my heart absolutely dropped when I heard the person coming up the stairs towards me. I remember feeling like I was in a scary movie because I'm hiding in the dark from this mysterious person, hearing the floor creak right outside the room I was hiding in. This person starts calling for me by name. He would say my name and ask, "Where are you? Are you here?" And the crazy thing was, it was not a voice I recognized at all. Between all of the members, my boss, everybody that could have been there, I realized this was not someone I knew, or at least not someone I spoke to regularly at the gym. A few minutes went by of being absolutely quiet, terrified, and listening to this person look for me. I heard footsteps go back down the stairs. My mom called me a few minutes later saying she had pulled in. No cars here, but the door was propped open. My mom runs into the building and tells me not to move from my spot until she's knocked and assured me that it's her. When we returned downstairs, I realized that nothing was missing. Things were just moved from their original spots. For instance, the phone I had left on the counter was in the room with the exercise machines. My boss didn't have cameras set up, so I never did figure out who this person was or what they wanted. But I did refuse to ever be there alone again. I no longer work there. I'm a creepy, mysterious guy. Let's never meet. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback or suggestions for stories you'd like to see, or anything like that, be sure to leave a comment below, because I always read all of the comments. I have a pretty big update for the channel for you guys. So, as you guys probably know, things have been pretty rough lately for the YouTube horror narrator community. Basically, on YouTube, a bunch of advertisers pulled out, and now everybody's getting way less returns on their views and everything like that. So, I wanted to announce that I finally set up a Patreon account where you guys can donate and contribute to the channel. If you like. Of course, it's never necessary. None of my content will ever be necessary to be paid for or anything like that. Basically, what Patreon is it's just a tip jar for artists, if you feel like supporting them. Of course, if you don't have the money or anything like that, please don't feel like you have to or anything. It's just there for people who want to. So I'll be leaving a link to that in the description of the video, and also probably in a comment with the timestamps for stories for this video. Please give me feedback on what you guys think about that. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I hope it will go over well, and I hope you guys understand why I'm doing that. If you'd like to contact me, or if you have any stories you'd like to send in or that you'd like me to read, please be sure to take a look in the description of the video below. There will be links to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the header of the email, or whatever you choose to send, what the title of the story is, what the theme of the story is, if it has any, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the music used at all in this video, the music is always in the description below, in the order which it appears in the video, and I also leave links to the artists themselves in case you like their music and would like to give them support and check out more of their work. And of course, if you have any constructive criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.